Good evening, and I'd like to also acknowledge the traditional owners of the land, and it's actually very interesting to follow Carolyn, because although I'm going to talk about advocacy in terms of food and nutrition, and specifically using food labelling, the system that I've developed over a number of years, or the framework, we also use to evaluate how we've gone about our advocacy. And as I was listening to Carolyn talk, I was thinking, yeah, she's going to do very well on that evaluation. So it'll be, in some ways, be quite interesting to see how that follows. So, hello, what's going on there? Back, forward, back. Okay, there we go. So some of this is going to teach you, first I'll go through quickly because it's going to teach you a little bit about sucking eggs, since we used that term earlier, but the prime driver for us is equity, and of course we understand the social determinants of health, and we target specific groups in much of our work. But we don't forget the very basics of public health that started with clean water, sanitation, immunisation, health promotion and health protection. Many of you know the story of John Snow, the first epidemiologist. I have a slightly different take on Snow. So he discovers cholera. He's told by the learned colleges, what's he talking about? Everybody knows it's in the air, but he goes, no, it's about water. And his work in epidemiology drives him to the Broad Street pump. And at the Broad Street pump, he tries to convince the local council to close it down. They won't do it. He removes the handle, they put it back. He removes the handle, they put it back. And in fact, in one of the public health, I think it's the Faculty of Public Health Medicine in England, still as its award, equivalent to Sydney Sachs, gives actually a replica of the Broad Street pump. But in fact, and lots of people say, see, that's what brought about the change, that's what brought about the great engineering feats. But actually that's not what happened. He found the problem, he continued to advocate for some time, but in fact there was also another little catalyst that came along. He had no success until 1858, which was the great stink of London. Westminster couldn't meet because the smell was so bad, sitting right next to the Thames. The politicians needed an excuse. And thank you, John Snow provided the excuse, and that led to the so I told you I had a slightly different take on it, and that led to the great engineering work and the the initiation of sanitation schemes throughout the world. So just a quick look at public policy. There's two things about policy. One, the first one that you've probably heard, you should never watch me made as sausages, and maybe that's German sausages. But I think even more important is this notion that came from the Sackville Royal Commission. The most pervasive misunderstanding that affects a commission such as ours is the belief that crucial policy questions can be resolved by carefully weighing up the scientific, medical and statistical evidence, because that is a misunderstanding. That's not to say they're not important, and we'll come to that. So according to Meredith Edwards, these are important factors that affect policy making: the context, perceived public opinion, politics and power, who's in power, how it's used, the amount of money around, ideology, and never do we see more strongly the ideological drive in governments, and in Queensland and in federal Parliament at the moment, because we should, when you're feeling really frustrated here, and particularly with the Liberal Party, have a look at what's happened in Victoria. Because David Davis, the Minister in Victoria, is Liberal, but he's actually achieved some really interesting, innovative work around public health. So sometimes we just put it down to parties, whereas actually within parties there's also swings and roundabouts. Oops. And there, I just like that photo. So elements of advocacy. And two of them were mentioned by Carolyn, which sort of sums up a lot of them. I've broken them down into 10. And the point about advocacy is you're trying to influence, and when you're trying to influence, you're trying to bring about change. So what I did was looked at change management theory and started with who we should influence and what steps we're talking about. So the first one is you need to establish a sense of urgency. I'll come back to these, by the way. Creating a guiding coalition, developing and maintaining influential relationships. So Carolyn was talking about all of these. Developing a change vision, communicating the vision for buy-in, empowering broad-based action, being opportunistic, generating short-term wins, never letting up, and incorporating the changes into culture. Anybody like to have a go? Let's have a little indication of which one of those are most important. Have a little think in your mind which one of those is most important. We'll come back because I actually don't have much time, so I'll come back to that since I'm going to run through all 10 of these. So the first one, establishing a sense of urgency. So we're talking about now front of pack labelling, how we're going to do it. It was about obesity. Everybody here understands about obesity. So then we go to creating the guiding coalition. So when it came to front of pack labelling, don't forget that what these groups were interested in was traffic light labelling. But the Blewett report had come down and said, yes, you should do, under certain restricted conditions, you should proceed with traffic light labelling. Ministers said no, so we moved on from that. We went to stage 2 in building a coalition, which was government, and actually particularly and specifically guided by ministers and led by Jane Halton, the Secretary of the Federal Department of Health. And then in stage 3, and this was particularly interesting, the Australian Food and Grocery Council, Beverages Council, Industry Group, Australian Retailers Association. We formed this within about 6 weeks of doing it. There was an article in The Lancet by Rob Moody and others that said, look, when you're actually trying to bring about change in public health, you certainly can't work with industry with tobacco. We all agree with that. Can't work with industry regarding alcohol. Agree with that. Can't work with industry with junk food. Oops, let's see how this works. And in fact, we're already quite underway with a positive relationship on this particular topic. So we have to develop and maintain influential relationships, and actually these are the people that we were working with right across the political spectrum, on both Labor, Liberal, some crossbenchers, and key bureaucrats, along with journalists, all played various different roles in it. But we had to develop the change vision. So what was the vision? We know we can't have traffic lights, but the new change vision actually started in a meeting. Our change vision also brings into clear guidance the policies that we have with PHAA and how we're going to deliver on those fundamental policies. The star rating system actually came out of a little discussion I had with my daughter. I was about to go to this meeting. She has a master's degree, not in nutrition, it's in Middle Eastern and Central Asian studies, so she's not interested in nutrition in the slightest. But Dad, I don't want to know about how much sugar, fat and salt. I just want to know whether it's healthy or not. And driving to the meeting, I was thinking quite a lot about that. And then we started to work out what kind of a system, and I suppose that's where we come up with the idea of rating on a 1 to 10 basis, and then discussed how we might do the rating. Then what we needed to, some of these sort of overlap. You have to also communicate your vision for buy-in, and so we've done that in broad terms in nutrition, but had also worked on things such as our food policies and a range of food issues. But it was true to say that we had not convinced the ministers effectively. So if there was a failure in our work, it was right back at the traffic light level, and then appeared to fail in terms of developing the Health Star rating system as well. Actually, I might just go back to that. We had negotiated the system. We had we had agreed on a position. Everybody involved that you saw in there, including industry, agreed on a position to put to ministers. It had left our hands. It was going through the bureaucrats. They were taking it to the ministers, and that's when the Food and Grocery Council decided it was going to renege on the agreement. In fact, I went to the Food Ministers meeting with the Food and Grocery Council as co-chairs of the technical design working group. So we had to work out how you put the foods into the STAR system. And I thought I'll go early to that food, having been a food minister myself. I knew how they work, so I went early to join them for coffee. Just walked in, and the first minister I went to was the Queensland, who was not the health minister but the junior minister. Is the first name Chris Davis? And I thought, okay, that'll be a Conservative. There's going to be a Conservative man, so we better have a talk to him first, and then things will get easier after that. And I didn't even get a word out, and he said, "Well, how's that Food and Grocery Council reneging on what they've agreed on? There it is in writing, and now they come to us and try and undo it. Well, we certainly can't tolerate reneging, can we?" I didn't have much of an argument to make, and that was actually that meeting was when the system was first approved. So empowering broad-based action is the next of the steps, and I've told a little bit of that story. But once the Food and Grocery Council had reneged, then we needed actually to broaden that base, and so we involved not just the members who were there, but a wide range of food groups and others, and we started to get these star rating images out so people could see that it was a sensible and simple system for interpretation, and we kept the messages simple. It's going to be a simple system. Reach for the stars. The more stars, the healthier the food, and proceeded down that line. But you also, one thing that's really interesting to me in advocacy work is the being opportunistic, and Carolyn touched on this actually about the TGA individuals phoning you, and actually you've got to react to them, change quickly, even though you were going down this direction, but they say to you, but that's not going to work, you've got to do so and so. And sometimes it's actually really difficult to see that opportunity and go for it. So, and in this case it was the Health Star Rating Calculator website. Now the story of the website is that actually we knew that it would either be pulled down or it would be successful, that it was going to go up the nose of the Food and Grocery Council. So I knew when it was about to come up, we had our press release ready. But we were also ready for it to come down again. The reason for that is because we had built up such strong relationships with a wide range of people. We understood that if it stayed up, there would be parts of industry that would implement it. We knew Sanitarium would implement it. We knew Coles were going to implement it. It went up in February. By June, when ministers were going to next meet, if it was already on PACs, it would be almost impossible for them to say, no, we're not going to allow industry to do this. That's why the Food and Grocery Council had to intervene and to bring it down. When it came down, I learned 10 minutes before. That's right. First of all, the department informed us that the website was coming up, and we put out a press release saying, "How fantastic is that? This is terrific. People will be able to see what's in their food." And I already had begun discussions with a journalist, Margot O'Neill of Lateline, about running it in their first program of the year, because it's February, and this is the week before their first program came out. 8 hours later, the website came down, and I learned about 10 minutes before it was going to come down. I phoned my daughter and said, "Are you near a computer? Can you get some computer shots?" He said, "Oh, Dad, you're hopeless. Just use your iPhone and get some snapshots." So, okay. So, in fact, I did. And every single image you ever saw in any part of the image actually came from my iPhone. And because we just then put them out to any media outlet that was going to do them. So daughter played two parts in this role with a hopeless dad, and here's some of the shots that came from my iPhone. What's amazing is they were so bloody good. And that's what took me by surprise. But I couldn't get the whole page. I could only get that part, but hey, the media are able to use that. They had something actually to do to remind people what the... when you actually see the final website, and most of it's actually up now under the minister's site, but when they actually do the final website, everybody will go, what was the fuss about? The fuss wasn't about what's on the website. The fuss was about the fact that it was forced to come down. And there was a bit of opportunism in this. So Amy Coideroy actually finds the story and starts to drive it. Because I was already working with Margot O'Neill, I said, Amy phoned and said, look, I wasn't here yesterday and I saw your press release, then I went to look at the website and it's down and I can't find it. I said, because I'm talking to Margot O'Neill, I said, oh, Amy, I'll get back to you on that. I'll check with the department and see why it's come down and or if they've got a technical problem. I went back to Margot O'Neill and said, Amy Coideroy's got a sniff on this. It's Thursday. She's not going to run the story until Monday. And she said, Michael, you know, you'll never hold the story to this. Just go back to her. So which I did. And then explained to her that's what I'd done. You've got to get these people on side. It's a juggle. And the one piece of information that I did have was that Alastair Furnival, the Chief of Staff of the Health Minister, had worked for Cadbury's, and Cadbury's, remember, had got a very significant funding injection for tourism down in Tasmania, and here he is working for that minister. What I didn't know, and Amy Bainbridge actually found in the next phase of the story, was he also hadn't declared any of his conflicts of interest, and that's why the story started to snowball. So front page of Saturday's Sydney Morning Herald and right across the Fairfax media. It then picked up with the ABC finding that further information. We didn't want it to stop. It had already taken a bit of a life of its own. The Senate's sitting, questions are being asked. So we sat down as a meeting with ourselves. So Choice said, look, what we can do is do some examples and show people what they would look, what particular foods would look like. That'll keep it going. And I said, well, what we'll do is we will get as many professors of health that I can to sign a letter. So we actually put out a statement by 50 public health professors that the site should be reinstated, and Cancer Council did some others, and Obesity Coalition did some others along the same sort of line. So it was a coordinated approach. There was also the political machinations going, where Senators Wong and Faulkner were questioning Fiona Nash and giving her very hard questioning, almost all around the issue of the conflict of interest. And the fact that Senator Nash denied them first, so it just made a mess for her. And so we had actually now got everybody in Australia knowing that there was a Health Star system around and how it might be, but we actually want it to come up again. And Senator Nash is showing pretty firmly that she's not going to put it up. So we had to look at what our next steps would be. There was a cost-benefit analysis already underway for industry. How much does it cost to actually put this star rating on their food? And industry were claiming $400 million and outrageous. In fact, the first time they ever came to the group that were looking at it, they said 700 million, and we all just rolled around the floor laughing. They came back and said, all right, 400 million. And we were still laughing. So we had a cost-benefit analysis done. That cost-benefit analysis said, if you force industry to do it really quickly, it does cost large sums of money. If you give them enough time, 2 or 3 years, then it costs very, very little. So we moved to try and give Senator Nash room to move, and the Food and Grocery Council room to move. So we allowed, along with the Health Star rating system, to let them have their baby, the daily intake guide. You know, the little, when we're on site, I call them the thumbnails. When we're fighting with them, I call them the tombstones. And so, in fact, they don't do any harm, they just don't do any good. They're absolutely useless systems, so we let them run those as well. But that also allowed Heart to run their tick as a parallel system if they want. Heart Foundation were always ready to give up that tick, which I think is because it's a financial benefit to them, and I think that was always brilliant, and they had said that from the beginning. We then had Sanitarium and Coles working on modifying the graphic so that we could say, as I did when the final announcement was made, that actually things had changed. And Senator Nash was able to lead the system. So this is when she's under attack. So and the Sydney Morning Herald publishes a picture like that, not exactly the most flattering picture. And this is the one that appears on her website a little bit. I learned that very early in politics. I have to tell you that when you're in strife, the picture goes. When you're doing well, it's that style of picture. And of course, I think part of the main lesson is that we don't give up. So we knew this was all going to work. There was constant talk about ministers didn't have much choice, but we didn't give up. We kept working to ministers, writing to ministers, and so forth. And we also made this other modification. This was actually from Coles and Sanitarium, so you saw the sort of square version, which in some ways I like better. But this allows it to go on a much wider range of packs and still does the trick. So that's actually what it's going to look like on the packs. That is what is actually approved in the style guide. And then of course we need to incorporate the changes. The Monster Muesli Company's already done it. Sanitarium have been involved from the very beginning. I'd need to declare a conflict of interest. The Public Health Association has taken money from Sanitarium, although not on this issue. At Coles, we've not taken any money. We're involved in the graphic. The beverages industry were always quite comfortable with it. The bureaucrats met in early May. They were happy. Ministers in late June, and that's when it got its approval. Already Woolworths and Coles are going to use it, and just recently I heard on the grapevine, and I haven't actually had it verified, that Nestle are not only going to use it in Australia, but they're going to apply it worldwide. We'll see how that goes. The Front of Pack Oversight Committee, of which I'm a member, met in July to just finalise the style guide and some of the issues. So we might begin to see it on these sorts of packs shortly. After the ministers approved it, we'll just put that up so you can have a quick look at those. After the ministers approved it, was very interesting because the first question I was asked was basically to pillory Senator Nash. That's what they wanted. We've actually moved on from that. So my response was, what you saw in the Senate and elsewhere was a very vigorous debate that we were having, mainly with the Food and Grocery Council. That had been going for 2.5 years behind the scenes. The only difference was that it came out. And what we're pleased about is that Senator Nash has delivered. She has delivered it. She's chair of the Food Ministers' meeting, and they've delivered it. So we're able to actually change the tone in order to work with a government that was going to be. By the way, the one that I find most interesting here is the yogurt. Oh, I can't. I think it's on this one. There's one yogurt, and somebody can see it down the bottom. Okay. Yes, there's one yogurt that gets 2-star, and the other one, it's not on this one. There's a light yogurt gets 5-star. But there's actually a yogurt that says it's a no-fat yogurt, and it gets 2 stars because it's so loaded with sugar. But normally you pick up, no fat. That's going to be better than low fat. That's one of the advantages of using the system. Should there be a step 11? Dealing with a pushback, because I've touched on that, and I'm sure you dealt with it a number of times in women's issues. I mean, it keeps coming, and it will continue. And it's one thing that I do wonder about. So it's approved. The website's not up, but it will come up. And what do we do then? We know that the Food and Grocery Council are going to push back on it. And when I talk to my colleagues, we say, well, the way we counter that is we try and push the envelope even further. So there'll come a time where we'll talk about with the star rating, the nutrients of public health significance there. Maybe we should push to have those colour-coded, which is like a traffic light system actually. And not that we'll get it, but it stops them pushing back on what we have got. And I think so when we're doing advocacy, really what we need to do is keep in mind the five P's. The first one's planning, and that's why the PHA has 60 or so policies that we update every 3 years. No, planning is the other stuff. Policies we update. That's all part of it. Persistence, and you talked about that. Patience. That is the hard one. You just keep at it. And opportunistic. I can't find a P, so I've done it this way. Sort of 5 Ps, and of course it is the persistence that is the challenge. Finally, 1858, the year of the Great Stink, and sometimes advocacy action does require creating a great stink. So.